тебе файлы, он просто.
Почему почитать что-то? Я же говорю, сначала сказала Елисеев, что на монтаж позвонишь. А вчера, потому что я с Костей спросила, говорю, Кость, что там слышно? То мне никуда его не снимать.
Когда указание директора будет, тогда будет.
Или выше.
Или выше, не знаю.
Я тоже согласна. То есть конкретно у тебя распоряжение регистратора или директор класса?
Себе не
Ну, сами все не. Ну, скажут, что у меня требует консультанта. Извините. Скажешь, а просто
Если они начинают,
надо почитать сначала.
значит, это способ запретить
А это не мама, что это другая компания, это не Microsoft. Конечно, ты о чем? Это как Adobe, который внедрен, и ридеры, и там, и архиваторы.
Наши известия,
Гер, который, а он надо детать какой-то, он для вообще что включен. У нас есть, здрасте, но там с ним связано.
Ну, 10 минут. Что-то народ сказал. Не сначала же спросить.
In this direction, it's more difficult than Скажите, пожалуйста, мне вчера наша странная книга. Я вчера пришла и что?
Там у нас пишут, что только компаратор пишет.
Она на весь экран смотрела.
Нет, она вначале, когда я мама прикрыла, она мне вчера уходила. А это правильно, что вещание?
У нас не позволяет система сделать синхронную.
А если они закупали сами?
Я знаю. Мы это приглашаем.
Да, сохранить деньги. Потому что не заложено.
Можно
Вы посмотрите. Чем это большой бизнес? Лучше бы писали заявление на порядке стоит права. Что мы написали? Что теперь это невозможно, а даже думать не хочу. А он написал. Не может. Я сижу, я сказал, это сложно, же меня работает. Стефан, это хороший. Он наш директор написал, ну, давайте выходите. Сегодня озвучивайте время, вижу. Ну, побили сюда, а я просто учусь. У нас что сейчас закрылось? Здравствуйте. А потом вам обязательно подпишем, да?
Обязательно. Я уже начала вчера делать, но в каждом классе.
Коллеги, чашечку кофе себе, пожалуйста, чайку возьмите и будем работать.
Потом. Я просто не знаю, какие там покажите.
Буквально 5 минут перед началом, а то поясню, мы вас бросим. Так, по поводу завтрашнего мероприятия, 10, 15, 20, в районе 10, 2 термоса хватит, пирожков 50, 70. Все ставим в начале?
Да, в начале, давайте 12 нас
В начале там не получится. Там же даже если столы будут стоять внутри, ходить туда-сюда нельзя, нужно это все выставлять до мероприятия, чтобы это стояло. Да, а вы там уже делаете перерыв. Да? Какая схема? Вопрос кофе, а тут будем брать. Сахар хватит, вот кофе не получится. Мало. И если вы тоже не останетесь, лимон есть. В 9 часов, да? Во сколько? Полдесятого?
Ну да, полдесятого.
Полдесятого должно быть. Ну так, интернет нам нужен, да? Проектор нужен, микрофон нужен.
Нам нужно еще записать
пишет у нас рабочая запись. Рабочая запись там, которая висит, она пишет полностью. Мы эту камеру используем, так сказать, все. Нормально она пишет. Единственное, просите говорить в микрофон, потому что лучше звук.
Хорошо, спасибо.
И все, уходишь. И ухожу. А дальше разберемся. Вот у что останется? Да, что останется. Что получится. Ничего страшного. Поводу читала,
Ну да, у нас был небольшой
один.
Да, еще на кому я хочу вывесить на сайте все-таки анонс. Там на сайте есть же эти вот данные, Светайла и Анастасия, которая может быть чернет, но по-моему там коротко. Ну, посмотрите, там ответственный за сайт. Не Светайла и коротко, которая Ася. Хорошо.
Потому что она однофамилица.
Хорошо.
Вот это.
Спасибо большое.
Что поговорились.
Да нет. Нет, еще
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, same.
да, мало. А, сейчас да, прикрою. Прикрой сейчас. Хорошо. Сейчас я. Спасибо. Сейчас приду, тебе. Чего? Нет, я сейчас должна посадить. Нет, нет. Посадить, а потом приду. Сейчас. Садитесь. Ну зачем?
Коллеги, мы скоро начнем, но кто хочет кофе, возьмите, пожалуйста, чтобы легче было работать.
Сказала, пишите другое дело.
Эти преступления будут кончаться. Всегда выбрасывают.
Окей. Доброе утро. Я очень рада видеть всех тех, кто вернулся. Я приветствую всех тех, кто слушает нас и смотрит через интернет. Доброе утро. И мы начинаем второй день международного семинара по статистике здоровья и использованию показателей глобальное время болезней. И несколько объявлений. Перерывы у нас сегодня будут немножко не такие, как заявлено в программе. Первый перерыв будет 15 минут, а перерыв во время ланча мы сокращаем волюнтаристским методом до 30 минут. И с добавлением перерыва в 14:30, короткого на кофе. Хорошо, приступим. Вчера мы провели очень плодотворный день, и сейчас мы с Меган Муни будем подводить итог вчерашнего дня, обзор вчерашнего дня, напомним основные моменты и хотим, чтобы вы восстановили в памяти происходящее и задали те вопросы, на которые у нас вчера не было времени. Вчера мы услышали доклады наших коллег и узнали как о методологии самого метода, так и о том, каким образом собираются данные, каким образом осуществляется процесс подготовки этих данных и процесс работы с этими данными. И мы увидели те результаты, которые были сделаны в рамках проекта «Глобальное время болезней 2017 год» по Российской Федерации, по областям. В процессе обсуждения прозвучал ряд вопросов, состоялась достаточно жаркая дискуссия. Я позволю себе напомнить эти вопросы. Один из этих вопросов – это был вопрос по поводу prevalence. И заключалась эта дискуссия в том, что коллеги старой школы говорили о необходимости непосредственных исследований, а не использования расчетных показателей. Тогда как в системе, которую нам представляют наши коллеги в этой системе, расчет показателей prevalence происходит действительно расчетным методом. И одна из дискуссий касалась Альцгеймера болезни и того, каким образом регистрировать это заболевание. Был поднят вопрос об учете миграции, об учете рождаемости у мигрантов, об учете этих показателей в связи с изменениями здоровья, особенно в региональном разрезе. Было обращено внимание также на данные по раку о достоверности этих данных и о наличии этих данных. Безусловно, это те вопросы, над которыми нам необходимо работать совместно и повышать достоверность наших показателей, исследований, которые мы проводим, и нашего представления о том, достаточно ли достоверно, или недостаточно ли, а достоверно ли выглядят наши показатели в рамках работы этой системы. Был также поднят вопрос о использовании корреляции, корреляционных коэффициентов при обсуждении факторов риска. Был поднят еще ряд вопросов, в том числе, например, это письмо, разосланное Министерством здравоохранения в 2016 году по поводу повышения внимания к диагностике ВИЧ и туберкулеза. И поэтому можно ожидать, что статистика, которая будет поступать, она будет уже более достоверной. И я бы хотела на этом месте дать вам возможность вернуться к тем каким-то вопросам, которые не были обсуждены в полной мере вчера, и предоставляю вам слово. А потом попрошу вас уже отреагировать. Коллеги, ваши вопросы. В любой момент, если у вас возникнет потребность что-то обсудить или задать вопрос, пожалуйста, поднимайте руку, и мы обязательно отреагируем. Меган, у нас пока нет вопросов острых для обсуждения. Пожалуйста, продолжайте.
Okay, good morning. Thank you to the colleagues for returning today. I think we had a very good discussion yesterday, which Amina has summarized quite well, and I know we learned a lot from you about some of these areas, Alzheimer, cancer, the discussion on life expectancy. That was very helpful to us for better understanding adjustments that can be made to the results that we are showing so that it better reflects your data and best expertise. So I think to briefly summarize from our perspective on the discussion of yesterday, I would say, we had a very good overview from Professor Nagavi about the GBD principles, emphasizing that this framework is one that provides comprehensive, comparable estimates, and that an important aspect of this work is correcting for errors or differences in data source, the ways that different data sources are measuring similar metrics, even in countries that have good quality data, such as Russia, and that this is done for all countries in the world. We had a discussion about the 4 analytic components of the GBD framework that comprise the methodology. First, the estimation of all-cause mortality, then the estimation of causes of death, then morbidity and non-fatal outcomes, and finally the risk factor analysis. And that through this framework you can see both the traditional population health measures such as estimated prevalence, incidence and mortality rates, as well as the more novel summary metrics such as DALYs, disability adjusted life years, YLLs, years of life lost, and YLDs, years lived with disability. So we also had a discussion and demonstration of the visualization tools that are available to all members of the workshop in order to review the Russian subnational estimates. That information and login access is on the slide at this moment. So it's a 2-step process. So first you go to the collaborator portal, and then you select the visualization tool of your choice, and we're recommending that you start with GBD Compare. And I will say, based on the very fruitful discussion of yesterday, we truly hope that you will take some time to go through these estimates and continue that discussion with us by email after we depart, because it's clear that there's a lot of joint learning that can happen and a lot that we can do to improve these subnational estimates, which again, to remind everyone, are very much at the beginning, and that this is an iterative process and it takes time and work to make them very strong. And so we absolutely expect and anticipate that you will find things in these results, these preliminary results, that you don't believe or find plausible, or that you have good evidence to refute, and we would love to hear that from you. So I hope we can continue that discussion today in a good spirit of academic exchange that we've had yesterday, and we truly appreciate you taking the time to be here and share your views with us. Other discussions from yesterday, we also spoke a little bit about the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, our relationship with the World Health Organization, and to reflect on that, I would suggest that you know, the key element here is that we, from the perspective of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, honestly hope that you'll participate in producing these estimates with us by joining the GBD Collaborative Network, and that that can help us to make these most reflective of your data and knowledge, because it's possible that they will be used within the World Health Organization for presenting harmonized regional estimates, and we wish for your input on that. Lastly, we had a good discussion on all-cause mortality and life expectancy methods and causes of death. And I know we ended very quickly on causes of death, so perhaps there are still many questions in the room, or you wish to return to Professor Nagabi's presentation. So I'll just end by saying, you know, I think it was a very fruitful first day, and we look forward to continuing and deepening the discussion today. Are there any questions or comments from the Russian colleagues about the points raised yesterday? Please.
Actually, I have a question not about the points raised yesterday, but I posted some of the pictures on Facebook, and and I have a lot of scientists as a friends, so they were asking about HIV data from IHME. So, do you plan to kind of, or anybody comments on this issue today or tomorrow in time?
I think tomorrow might be a better time for that discussion, because we have timetable, and unfortunately we need to move now to the next presentation. Okay? Professor, please.
Good morning, everyone. We did introductions yesterday, so I will introduce myself again. So when I started making my slides for the non-fatal and risk factors component, I had 370 slides. So I've had to cut that down quite a bit. I hope I've managed to distill the most important information and cover the things that will be most interesting and most relevant to people in the room. If I don't, let me know. I can make adjustments as we go. So we're going to start off and we're going to talk about non-fatal outcomes in the GBD study, some key concepts and background, the data we use, our methods, and looking at results, particularly results for Russia. And the structure is going to be just starting off with some background, then getting into the data. Talk about DISMOD, which is the modeling tool that we use for most of our non-fatal models. We'll talk about disability weights and how we calculate them and what they are, and then we'll have a look at some results with the focus on Russia. So often in public health, conversations revolve around mortality, they revolve around deaths. What's killing children, what's killing people. And of course this is important, but it only tells half the story. What I have here are global rankings of the leading causes of mortality around the world. On the left, cardiovascular disease, neoplasms, diarrhea, RI. And on the right, the leading causes of non-fatal disabilities, YLDs. And you see a very different picture emerges when we look at the non-fatal outcomes and the fatal outcomes. On the non-fatal outcomes, we're seeing mental health, substance use, musculoskeletal disorders. So it's pretty critical that we look at both sides of this picture if we really want to understand the complete picture of what's causing health loss and not focus solely on mortality. It's also important because the non-fatal burden is non-trivial. It makes up quite a lot of the overall burden. So what we have here are the total number of DALYs globally in every year from 1990 to 2017. And actually, I'm sorry, these aren't the number of DALYs, these are DALY rates, DALYs per 100,000. The purple portion of the bar are the YLLs, the fatal portion. The green portion of the bars are the YLDs, or the non-fatal portion. And what you'll notice is that overall DALY rates are declining, but 100% of that decline is because of improved life expectancy, reduced mortality, primarily reduced child mortality. At the same time, rates of YLLs are actually increasing. In 1990, YLLs made up about 22% of all burden. In 2017, they make up more than a third. So what's happening is we're living longer, and as we live longer, we're suffering more non-fatal health loss and less fatal health loss. This is actually a good thing, and in some cases what we see is as countries develop and as their health improves, we actually see increases in YLLs. But this is all to say that this is not something we should be ignoring. This is actually important for the conversation. So I think deaths are a little bit easier. It's a simple thing that we can wrap our heads around. Non-fatal outcomes are very challenging in that all diseases are not equal. If I were a magician and I could make everyone in this room sick, and I gave you the choice whether you wanted to have a cold or whether you wanted to become blind, I think there would be a unanimous decision to have a cold. And these two things differ in two ways. One is severity and the other is duration. So when we want to quantify non-fatal health loss, we need to quantify both of these pieces. So this graph is going to represent health over a hypothetical life, where 100% is 100% full health, 0 is death, and then this is age here on the x-axis. If we imagine someone is born and they were to live 1 year in perfect health and then die instantly and painlessly, they'd have a life that looks something like this. If we imagine someone lived into old age and they were in perfect health throughout their life, they would look something like this. But neither of these actually represent real lives. Most lives look something more like this. So someone is born, and throughout childhood they're generally healthy. Maybe they have colds and they sprain their leg and little things like that. And this person in early adulthood had a road traffic accident with a dramatic loss of health. They began to recover. They experienced the onset of diabetes and subsequent health loss, the experience of Alzheimer's and subsequent health loss, and this person then died at age 80. So the question is, how do we actually quantify this? If this is the goal, the red line is the goal, what we really want to understand is the area between the blue line and the red line. That's the health loss. And that area between the blue line and the red line, that's the DALY. That's what we're actually trying to calculate here. If we split this up into the portion before death and the portion after death, the portion of the curve here, these are YLDs, and the portion of the curve here are YLLs. Questions about that and the metrics?
Есть ли какие-то цифровые показатели нижней границы измерения идеального здоровья?
I'm not sure that I understand the question exactly.
Спасибо большое. Я понял. Вы говорили про стопроцентное здоровье. Я назвал это идеальным здоровьем. Ну, вот какие-то есть цифровые параметры, определяющие нижнюю границу этого идеального здоровья, то есть те 100%. Потому что может быть и 101, и 102, и 105.
So the upper limit is 100%, and 100% would mean there's no health loss whatever. You are perfectly healthy. You don't have a cold. You don't have a headache. You've experienced no health loss whatsoever. It would actually probably be fairly rare. Very few people would be in that state for very long. Most people experience some health loss at some point. Even if you have a cold, for example, if you're otherwise perfectly healthy, you'll still have some health loss. But it could never be more than 100. It could never be more than 100%, and it could never be less than 0%. 0% represents death.
If I understand the question, I think that perhaps you were asking about how we define the endpoint of life that we calculate the 100% from. Is that correct? Partly? Is that part of the question? So for at least that part of the question, I'll say this was discussed a bit yesterday, that within the GBD framework, the way that we determine the maximum life expectancy in order to set some threshold for what the expected end of life would be, we take a global approach where we take the lowest observed mortality rates in every age and sex group around the globe. Many of them come from Japanese women, as we discussed yesterday, and we compute a standard life expectancy. This is a choice. It's simply a methodological choice because you have to determine some upper limit in order to calculate how much of that is lost. So that's the choice that we are presently making in the GBD, but again, other choices could be made. It's more of a philosophical viewpoint about what could be the maximum life expectancy experienced in any population that's based on an idea that there should be no geographic rationale for inequality, but this is something about our methods.
Спасибо.
So calculating YLDs requires two components. First is the prevalence of the non-fatal outcome, and the second is the disability weight that quantifies the severity of the non-fatal outcome. So we'll talk about these two in turn. We'll start off on prevalence, and then we'll move to disability weights. And to start talking about prevalence, we'll start looking at data. For non-fatal outcomes, the data sources are more varied than they are for fatal outcomes. Fatal outcomes are mostly vital registration and verbal autopsy. But for non-fatal outcomes, we're using scientific literature, population surveys, hospital data, surveillance and case notification data, disease registries, cancer registries, and other sources. So it's a much more varied pool of data. What we're showing here is a map globally by country of the number of GBD causes with any non-fatal data. You can see for Russia, we are in the 85 to 119 category. So yesterday, there was some conversation about data quality and data abundance in Russia, maybe a little controversy about this. I think both sides of that controversy yesterday were actually correct. On one hand, Russia has very, very good data in the form of census data and vital registration data. On the other hand, for non-fatal outcomes and prevalence data, Russia has less data than most other European countries. Looking specifically at individual causes, here is vision loss, presbyopia. We have actually quite good data from Russia on this.
This is data.
These are number of data points.
Number of data.
Number of data points. Here's tuberculosis. Some data, but not an enormous amount of data. Drug use disorders. We actually have fairly good data across Russia on drug use disorders. Cancer registry data in Russia is reasonably good. We have subnationally quite a few years of data across Russia. And then here's an example of the other side of the equation. Here's hearing loss. We have no data at all on hearing loss.
Because they are hearing very good.
We have no data at all for hearing loss on Russia. This is musculoskeletal disorders. Again, no data whatsoever here. So the picture on vital registration is overall very good in Russia. The picture on non-fatal data is much more mixed. And in some cases we're finding good data, in other cases we're finding none at all. Okay. Any questions on data?
There are two questions. Marcel, please, and the result,
А как организован процесс передачи данных? Да? Ну вот, например, канцер-регистр, да? У вас есть какое-то соглашение или с организацией, которая это поддерживает? И второй вопрос, насколько детальная информация агрегирована или per case. Ну, например, канцер-регистр.
So it's very varied. In some cases, data are publicly available, and when they're publicly available, there's no need for data use agreements. In other cases, data are not publicly available, and actually Megan's team often works with organizations to get data access and develop relationships and data use agreements. Cancer registry data, do you know much about the cancer registry data? I don't work on cancer, so yeah. I know less about cancer.
Yes. Before starting GBT subnational for Russia, we had just three cancer registry from three cancer registry. What was Petersburg, what was Moscow, and one another. After we started GBT subnational for Russia, we got a journal, a hard copy of the cancer data by oblast, different cancer registry, and then we started to download from the website that you have. I do not remember the name of the website, but I think that this was also my question, that how we can make this very official, making some agreement between us and cancer registry system in Russia, that we can work more closely together, getting data and passing to you some result or something that we will find in the data. Now we have data by ICD code. It is by ICD code and it's quite well, but is that very sustainable? We need to have a very clear discussion between IHME, between your system, and make agreement that how we can get data if we have a problem, with whom we have to talk, because we have a good group that is working in cancer and they are very knowledgeable. It was your answer? Yeah. Okay. And now I have a question. We have data from Russia that it's published by the Ministry of Health. It is some type of report. number of new cases and number of the old cases for the different diseases. It is around 100, 200 diseases. I want to ask you, what is the source of this data and how they gather this data? Is this data is valid or not? And I think mostly comes from this institute, or institute is involved in the preparing of this data.
Я записала этот вопрос, и мы вернемся к его обсуждению, потому что я вот лично по своей профессиональной возможности не готова отвечать на него, потому что я этим не занимаюсь. Но я обязательно организую обсуждение этого вопроса. Хорошо?
Окей.
As some of our colleagues told us, basically there are two reporting forms. One is from polyclinics, and one is from hospitals. So they register new cases and sometimes older cases. And they basically report, and this is where the incidence of prevalence statistics normally come from.
This is all new cases that goes to the hospital?
Or polyclinics.
Спасибо. У нас есть представитель Минздрава, мы попросим вас по возможности ответить на этот вопрос. Спасибо.
У нас предусмотрены формы федерального статистического наблюдения, которые разрабатываются Минздравом и представляются Росстату. По этим формам все медицинские организации представляют информацию, которая касается как сети медицинских организаций, так и заболеваний, которые регистрируются в амбулаторной сети и в сети стационарной. И вот эта вот информация, которая действительно собирается по всем медицинским организациям, которые они представляют в виде отчетов по субъектам Российской Федерации, ЦНИАИС как раз занимается агрегированием, сбором этой информации, оценкой правильности, корректности ее предоставления. И вот эти данные, они официальные, они публикуются в том числе на сайте Росстата, и они идут вот в эти сборники по заболеваемости, которые располагаются на официальном сайте Минздрава. Там есть заболеваемость первичная, там есть общая заболеваемость, там есть сборники по социально значимым заболеваниям, и также там представлены данные по сети и всем медицинским организациям. Это официальная статистика.
Спасибо, пожалуйста.
Я представитель института Герцена, который непосредственно собирает канцер-статистику. И дело в том, что все больные с злокачественными образованиями подлежат обязательному учету в онкологических диспансерах. И, собственно говоря, вот эти вот агрегированные формы, они собираются, в первую очередь, этими диспансерами и потом передаются, но помимо официальной статистики, помимо статистических форм, еще существует канцер-регистр, в котором данные более подробные, уже уточненные, то есть их намного больше, чем в статистических формах. Мы собираем намного больше информации, и при желании мы могли бы вполне сотрудничать в том плане, что мы могли бы давать какие-то данные из канцер-регистра, а не только открытые данные из статистики официальной.
И здесь важно подчеркнуть нашим коллегам из специальных институтов, то есть специализированных, на примере, например, рака. Россия отчитывается и по раку, это агентство. И это официальная статистика, которую, в общем-то, мы должны сдавать. Поэтому вот этот диалог мы сегодня начали, и хорошо, что
представитель Минздрава с нами, мы должны заботиться о том, чтобы информация, которая идет из России в международные источники, была одной и той же. То есть, когда по разным каналам она выдается, то происходит зачастую, вы меня знаете, различные ошибки, которые потом очень трудно исправить. Поэтому у нас пока, на настоящий момент, вся информация международная идет через Минздрав. Минздрав утверждает, убеждает, что это одна и та же, которая год назад отправилась, и она такая же, как в этом году про тот год, ну и так далее. То есть нам надо просто обсудить, как выстроить.
Безусловно, нам надо обсуждать, как выстраивать, но нам надо также открывать наши данные для исследований. И это не обязательно Минздраву ломать голову над каждым блоком данных, над каждой статистической единицей решать, можно или нельзя ее выпускать.
Можно и нужно, чтобы она была одна и та же.
Одна и та же она будет, если будут люди, которые рассчитывают и эти расчетные данные, какие-то индикаторы передают. А данные для исследования, они должны быть доступны как в нормальных странах.
Just one little detail, as far as I understand, Ministry of Health and this institute gets lion's share, but it's still not 100%, because some organizations which belong not, for example, to railway station company, they report sometimes directly to Росстат, so Росстат calculates the sum. Just, so it's better to use Росстат data for the final. Правильно же?
Да, есть такая форма Минздрава, по которой данные Росстатом агрегируются по всем медицинским организациям, в том числе и по ведомствам.
We very much appreciate the complexity of this discussion. I hope one thing we can convey to you today throughout the course of Professor Stanaway's presentations is that the GBD framework often requires data at a greater level of detail and granularity than some of the international, other international reporting that is required of countries. So our methods, when Professor Stanaway showed the map of most detailed counts, if you could go back to that one, this is actually, there's a very important nuance in this graph that I wish to point out. Here we refer to most detailed GBD causes. How many most detailed causes were there in GBD 2017?
390?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, 390. So the point here is that our estimation is done at the very most detailed level of the cause list and the risk factor list. So this actually requires data that is down to that very most detailed level. We will still utilize data at a more aggregated level if that is all a country can report or is permitted to report, but the estimates do suffer from that lack of specificity. So I'm sure that Dr. Stanaway will show this throughout the day, how the methods are meant to take advantage of the greater level of detail that many countries are collecting, but that's often not reported to international agencies.
I think that this is a very important discussion, and also I understand that you want to continue presentation and go based on the agenda. I understand, but for us, most important is we have to understand the data from Russia. Otherwise, all of the things will not be correct. What is your suggestion? I think that at least between us and all of the colleagues from Cancer Registry and from Ministry of Health, we have to sit 1 hour today before they leave and we leave and talk about we understand the data. Because for me it's very important to understand the data because I have to explain for all other group in IHF. And my request is that you should guide us in the way that we can have this 1 hour discussion. Thank you.
Maybe this will not be 1 hour, but what can we do? We can start coffee break at 11 in 10 minutes and grab coffee, and I will kindly ask представителей Минздрава, представителя Института Герцена и всех, кто работает с данными раковых регистров и кто в этом пространстве хочет общаться и может что-то добавить. У нас есть комната, и у вас будет время начать эту дискуссию. Maxen, you will have place in a small room, and during the coffee break you can start this discussion. Okay?
Okay. I think that's great. Great. Any other questions on this? Okay. Okay. So, one thing that's worth noting at the outset is that our non-fatal models are statistically far more challenging than our fatal models. And I'll give you a simple example to show you why. The graph on the left is an example of what data look like for causes of death. Nice, neat, very obvious patterns. And the data on the right are what data look like for non-fatal outcomes. Lots of data, very messy, lots of heterogeneity. So you can imagine it's much easier to fit a model to this than it is to fit a model to this. So there's quite a few challenges. The first I mentioned already is heterogeneous data. The second challenge are inconsistent age categories. Different studies, different reporting organizations report outcomes using different age bins. We have multiple case definitions and multiple diagnostics that are used. We often have studies of non-represented populations. We get lots of studies in pregnant women, for example. We have data of multiple parameters, so sometimes we get prevalence data, sometimes we get incidence data. And then there are a lot of geographies with little or no data. So these are the sort of challenges that we're dealing with our non-fatal models. And in response to these, statisticians at IHME developed a tool called DISMOD. This is a Bayesian meta-regression tool that we use for most of our non-fatal models. For statisticians in the room, this chain is a Markov chain Monte. This model is a Markov chain Monte Carlo or MCMC model. It uses age integration to deal with data of any sort of age categorization schemes. It produces distinct solutions for each year for both sexes. And you could run this as a single parameter or compartmental model. I'll talk about that in a bit. And it uses a cascading geographic hierarchy, something else I'll talk about. So the second to the last point here, single parameter versus compartmental model. This is actually quite relevant to the conversation we had yesterday about what we do when we have incidence data and mortality data, but no prevalence data, which is a common situation. The way this works is you have a susceptible population. This is the general population of people who do not have an illness. And those people can move to the prevalent population through incidence. They can become cases. In some cases, depending on what the disease is, they may be able to remit and go from prevalent back to susceptible. People in the susceptible population can die of any cause other than the cause of interest. We call this other cause mortality. People in the prevalent population can die of the cause of interest, assuming it's a fatal cause, but they can also die of other causes. Someone with HIV can get hit by a truck, for example. So we overall have all these flows and compartments that describe the population and how they can move between different states. And DISMA actually can calculate all of this. So this is what we mean by it's a compartmental model. It uses a series of ordinary differential equations It allows it to solve for flows and compartments if given enough information. Because of this, we can use non-prevalence data to estimate prevalence. If we have cost-specific mortality estimates, which we get from Mosen's team, and we have all-cause mortality estimates, which we get from Haidong, our demographer, his team. We often have information on remission. If we give it data on incidence, it can solve for prevalence. And it can solve for prevalence quite accurately. Any questions about the idea of the compartmental model and how that works?
Скажите, пожалуйста, в эту модель вы вводите только расчетные коэффициенты связи, или вы можете руками ввести вероятности перехода, полученные из исследований, других исследований?
Yeah, that's a great question. We can override. So because it's a Bayesian model, we can give it priors. So for example, say Parkinson's disease. We'll put a prior on remission to say there's no remission of Parkinson's disease. We'll put a prior on incidence to say there's no incidence of Parkinson's disease amongst children. So we can override things to force the model to follow known attributes and cause. Other questions? So the last point here is that this model uses a cascading geographic hierarchy. The way this works is the model starts off and takes all of the data that we have available for a cause, and you could use covariates. Perhaps you want to use things like economic development, sociodemographic index. Perhaps you want to use water supply and sanitation, whatever it may be. You could use covariates to help inform the model. At the global level, the model will estimate the covariates for those, we'll estimate the coefficients for those covariates. It'll estimate random effects for locations. It'll determine a global prior for the age pattern. And this will be a single model for both sexes and all time periods. What happens is the model then uses the global fit as a prior for every superregion. So we see the superregions here. The model then refits again within each superregion based on the data and covariates for that superregion. So what this gives us is 84 models, one model for each superregion, each sex, and each year, I believe. 7 superregions, 6 time periods, male and female. So that gives us 84 models. We then get a fit for every superregion. The fit for a given superregion gets passed down as the prior for all of the regions within it. And again, it reruns all the models at the region level. Similar situation, 228 models, there's 19 regions, 6 time periods, male and female again. So it then refits again for each of these models to come up with a fit for each region. It then takes a region fit and passes that down as the prior to all of the countries within the region. And it refits again within the country. So we have 195 countries and territories. It does this also for subnationals. 6 time periods of male and female for a total of about 6,300 models. And then what it does is it throws out all of the fits for the super regions and the regions and it aggregates back up. So it takes the fit at the finest geographic level and it aggregates those back up to come up with final estimates for regions and super regions in the globe. What this allows the model to do is maintain a really strong spatial structure. So if we have no data from Russia, for example, but we have data from Kazakhstan and Belarus, we'll end up with good spatial structure for this region and sort of sensible estimates. So it allows for good behavior spatially, but it also allows for good variation based on data that we have within regions and based on covariate differences. So this is the cascading geography of DISMOD. Any questions about how this works?
Yes,
с восстановлением данных. И если вы восстанавливаете данные, то они должны совпасть вот по всем уровням грануляции. Спасибо.
That's correct.
А скажите, пожалуйста, вот это восстановление данных, до какой степени, как часто вы их восстанавливаете, чтобы считать достоверными? Ну, например, восстановили в этом году, в том, в третьем, и все они восстановлены, вот как долго, и вы все равно верите достоверно. Спасибо. Достоверность. Насколько долго вы это делаете, чтобы признавать их достоверными? Ну, вы раз восстановили, два, три, сколько? Спасибо.
Oh, I think I misunderstood your original question. Can you tell me what you mean when you say restore the data?
Adding new data or...
Ну, вы сказали, что если нет данных по России, есть данные по Беларуси, Казахстану, мы занимаемся восстановлением данных, которые при достаточно глубокой грануляции дают нам хороший результат. Окей. Но если вы сделали эту итерацию один раз, два, три, вы все еще верите этим данным, они у вас будут достоверны? Вопрос.
Oh, I see. Okay, so I think there may have been a slight glitch in translation. What's happening is we're not actually using data from Belarus and Kazakhstan for Russia, but because we have data from other countries in the region, it helps us get a very good fit in the region. So we have a strong prior on what things should look like in Russia, even if we have no data there.
But anytime that we got data for Russia, we will add to our system, and then in this time we are not getting strength from neighborhood country, we get just from the data from Russia that we have. That's why we are very interested to have data for each country.
Вот это очень важные вопросы. Здесь все разъяснено. Да? У вас есть вопросы?
Вопрос. Если мы провели исследования, и для нас это достоверные данные, достоверные по международным признакам достоверности, можем ли мы подавать на какое-то изменение каких-то данных, которые вы принимали ранее? Или вы видите это и тоже будете это принимать во внимание? Спасибо.
Any time that we find new data, if we do not have for the country or for this location, these new data we will add and we will use. But if we had, for example, think about Moscow City, we had a previous hypertension study, and now you did another hypertension study. We will keep both because they are in the different time. And our model that Jeff mentioned, we all of the time when we run model, we borrow strength from the time and from geography. From the time, if we had 2-3 years ago a study about hypertension, and now we have another. Between these two times, we borrow strength from these and from this, and we make them now. All of the time we are using any data that we have. If we do not have data, we will go to the neighborhood country and get data, and also Kobani.
And I'll add to that, this is one of the great strengths of the collaborator network. People who are GPT collaborators in countries, they note that we're missing data sources, or they note unusual estimates that don't agree with data they've seen. they get to see those estimates in advance, they get to see the data we're using in advance, and can tell us, hey, you're missing data, here's data sources that would be useful. Or these estimates for this particular oblast are strange. Have you found this data source? So that's really one of the big purposes of the collaborative effort.
Очевидно, что модель можно использовать для предсказания. Проводили ли вы эксперименты по предсказанию, ну, например, mortality rate, и на будущий год предсказали, получили данные, сверили, и как примерно вы оцениваете точность предсказаний каких-то простых каких-то показателей? И вообще вопрос валидизации модели, он стоял или стоит на, скажем, есть ли какой-то способ валидизировать модель на независимых каких-то данных?
Yes. First, any model that we run, we included 70% of our data. And we keep 30% of our data for the out-of-sample validity and in-sample validity. And we select for the ensemble model that I mentioned yesterday, we select all of the model with the lowest, with the highest, lowest in-sample validity. This is one thing. Then automatically for each model we will check. Second thing that it is important, we usually for the last year when we are saying GBT 2017, we will publish GBT 2017 in GBT in 2018. But there is no any country that in 2017 published causes of death data, for example, in 2017, because they don't know. Usually they publish data 1 or 2 years after. We estimated for last year, usually we estimated. And then next year, when we get the data, we will check how was our estimation in 2017 for the 2017. Now we have data for 2017, what is our result? And this is automatically happen.
Yeah, I'd like to recommend that, because what Mohsen just told you is 100% accurate for COD, but it's not accurate for most data. For causes of death, that's exactly what we do. For this model on the non-fatal side, we don't do cross-validation. We'd like to. We've been trying to build it into the tool. The problem is, because of the nature of this model, because of the geographic hierarchy, because of the computational requirements of differential equation solver, these models take about 12 hours to 24 hours to run. So doing the ensemble cross-validation approach is proving computationally intractable. We are working on trying to do it. We actually have built it into the tool where there is an option to apply cross-validation. But when we tried it, it takes the models 2 weeks to run. This coming cycle of GBD, our plan is to do all the modeling, and then for the very final models, run cross-validation on all of them. So we're hoping to implement that this year. It takes a lot of cluster capacity. Just for some sense of scale, our current cluster has, I believe, 25,000 cores. It's a massive cluster. It's the largest computing cluster at the University of Washington. And these models will still take a couple of weeks to run on that. So it's computationally challenging. The other part of your question relating to forecasting. We actually have a forecasting team. This is a project that's been in the works for a while, and it's beginning to produce estimates now. I believe they have their first paper was accepted.
Published.
Published in October.
It was published in October.
I'll talk about it later.
Okay. So there is a forecasting team that's working on this. They're doing pretty exciting stuff. We're trying to project out, I believe, to 2040 right now. And it sounds like Megan's going to talk more about that later, so I'll not get into that at this point.
Хорошо? Вопросы пока ушли? Замечательно. Нам надо небольшой перерыв, когда лектору будет удобно, он нам скажет, когда мы пойдем на перерыв. When you will be comfortable, we can go on to have coffee break. What you will see.
Should we finish this section or should we take a break and come back?
Maybe that. Okay, we will take that. Okay. Уважаемые коллеги, у нас 15-минутный перерыв. Все, кто связан с данными по раку, пожалуйста, возьмите кофе и еду и в маленькую комнату. Да, Минздрав обязательно, да, спасибо. Все, кто знает и хотят работать в группе коллабораторов по раку. Окей?
Я могу пояснить по форме? Это что маразм? А? То, что это маразм? Ну вот в том-то и дело. Нет, это только раз не связано с комиссией,